Hi and welcome to a new instruction video. Today we are going to throw a very fun shape, which is going to be a salt and pepper shaker. They're quite fun because it's like a closed shape, but you make a hole in the bottom and then you can turn it around, put salt in it and then turn it around again, and then when you shake it, the salt comes out. And in this video I'm going to show you how to throw, trim and glaze it. And I'm also going to show you in the end how you can use it, and yeah, because that may be practical if you don't know. So without any further ado, let's head over to the wheel and get started. I first take a little bit of water to attach the ball of clay onto the bed, and then I start throwing. I first press the clay onto the bed so that I'm sure that it gets stuck, and then I start centering it. I cone up the clay by pressing my hands towards each other, and then I press the cone downwards so that the clay gets centered. And I repeat this multiple times until the clay is fully centered, and then when it is, I flatten it a little bit, and then I start working on the shape. Now this piece is going to be a little bit different than probably any other piece you've ever thrown, because it's just a little bit weird to make the bottom, but I'll explain everything to you. So the first thing that I do is make a hole at the bottom. So I just press my finger into the clay and I press all the way down to the bed. And then what we need is a little cylinder in the middle of the piece here, and I do this by pressing away the clay here at the side, as you can see. So I leave some clay in the middle for a little cylinder, and I keep most of the clay on the outside because we will have to close the whole shape, so you will need quite some clay there. And as you can see, the cylinder at the middle becomes higher by itself, but you can also pull this up by holding one finger on the inside and then pulling up the clay from the outside. But in this case that wasn't really needed. Then I made sure it was nice and open, and I slowly started closing it. I do this by holding my fingers around it and slowly moving them towards each other, and I make a movement from the bottom all the way down to the top. Then I realized that my middle part was actually a little bit too high and I wouldn't be able to close the whole shape around it if I would leave it this high. So I decided to just cut off some clay at the top with a needle tool, and then I close it again. So if this part becomes a little bit too long, you can just cut it off, but that's of course not needed if you just make it at the right height in one go. Then another thing, when I'm closing it again and you don't want to close all the way and you also want to take away the slip in the middle, you can use your needle tool for this so that it just looks clean and you don't have any slip in there. And then I start working on the outside and I just start pulling up the sides just like you do with any other piece. So I hold a sponge in my right hand and I hold my left hand on the inside and I press towards my left hand, and then I make an upwards movement and repeat this multiple times until the walls are like a little bit higher. And then I slowly start closing the shape, and I do this by holding my hands around it and slowly move them towards each other, just like I did with the middle part, but now it's just a little bit bigger. And then sometimes I pull up another time to make the clay a little bit thinner, because when you press the clay inwards it becomes a little bit thicker, and then you can also get it a little bit higher by just pulling it up another time. So just like this I slowly start closing it and slowly start making the hole at the top smaller. And at the end I press the clay onto itself, just like I'm doing here at the side. Now I like to make a little handle at the top, so that's why I'm actually pressing it onto itself a little bit lower than I would normally do, just so that I have like a little ball of clay on top of here that I can use as a handle, because I think that looks cute, but it's not like necessary. So you could also just make it nice and round and not make a handle at all. Now one very important thing when closing this shape is that the little cylinder on the inside should not be attached to the clay around it, because there needs to be an opening for the salt to go in and out of the piece. So the cylinder should just be standing inside of the piece without being touched to the top of the piece. And then I smooth out the whole piece with a sponge, just so that it looks nice and you don't have any lines or anything. And then I cut away some excess clay at the bottom. This will just save me some time when trimming. So I just cut this away with a wooden knife, and then I also clean my bed with this. And then I smooth out the bottom with a sponge again, just so that it looks a little bit nicer. And then the throwing part is done, and I'm going to let this dry for 1 day until it is leather hard. And now it is ready to be trimmed, and as you can see the hole in the middle is already visible from just cutting it off the bed, but it still needs to be opened up a little bit at the bottom. And I also want to smooth out the sides and also make a little foot ring. So I place it upside down on top of my gift grip. Also one of the reasons that I made the top a little bit flat, so that it can actually stand upside down. You could also make it round and then just hang it in the gift grip. And then I start trimming it. I first like to start off with a small trimming tool because the bottom was a little bit wobbly, and then I just smooth it out and make it even. And I also cut away some excess clay from the side here. The clay is always just a little bit thick here, so I like to just cut that away and make the shape nice and round. While trimming, I would make sure that you don't let any clay fall into the hole in the middle, because otherwise there will get clay into your salt shaker, and you of course don't want little piece of clay coming out of the shaker when you're shaking salt out of it, because, well, that would not be very nice. And then I'm going to work a little bit more here on the middle part, and what I like to do is just cut away some excess clay here to make the hole a little bit wider. That way it's easier to put the salt in. And the reason that I cut this off instead of trimming this away is that it is easier to take away the clay. It also goes a little bit quicker. Yeah, you can just cut off a bigger piece at once and then you can just take it away with your hand instead of like trimming away a lot of little pieces which will probably fall into the piece. So that's the reason why I'm cutting it like this, but you could also just trim it if you like. And then I carefully trim it a little bit just to smooth it out and make it look a little bit nicer. And then the last thing that I do with trimming is make a little foot ring. And I just do this by cutting away a little bit of clay there, and I hold my thumb in front of the hole so that the clay won't fall in there. And then the trimming part is also done, and I like to smooth it out with a sponge, so I just go over it with a wet sponge. And then to get rid of the slip that was created by the sponge, I go over it with this bigger trimming tool that isn't really sharp, so it doesn't really trim, but it just takes away the slip so that it looks nice and smooth. And then I also go over it with my finger so that it's just perfectly smooth, and I don't have to do any smoothing out after the firing, and I also don't have to sand it or anything. And then the salt shaker is finished, and I let it dry before it can go into the kiln for a biscuit fire. And I've decided to decorate this piece with a few underglazes, which I will also be using in some other videos that will be coming up, which are also a little bit like spring themed. The glaze that I'm going to use are apricot from Mako, intense yellow from Emco, medium blue from Emco, and iceberg blue also from Emco. And I'm going to use a technique that I also use to glaze the Love collection, which is making lines like this. I'm making a pattern all over the piece, as you can see, and I will just do this with 3 different colors around the base. And later on I will be glazing the top with the medium blue glaze, because I think that will look fun. And I'm using a brush with very long hairs, and the great thing about that is that it holds quite a lot of glaze, and because of that it is just very easy to make long straight lines like this. And if the line isn't perfectly straight, then it will just only look more playful, so I wouldn't worry about that too much if you'd like to glaze your piece like this as well. And then when I finish decorating the piece, I let it dry, and after it has dried I apply a clear glaze. I use clear glaze from Emco, and I apply 2 coats all over the piece on the outside. And after the second coat has dried, I always like to clean the bottom on top of a wet piece of fabric. So that's what I'm doing here, and as you can see it looks nice and clean. And then it can go into the kiln, and here is the final result. I hope you like it. That was it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked it. If you're going to make these yourself, you're going to post them on Instagram, please tag me at Calder van Andel, because I would love to see them. And that was it for this video. I hope to see you next time. Bye bye!